We've been talking about David. We're cleaning house before we get into Samuel chapters 2, where David walks into Hebron like a champ. We should get there next week. But we want to clean up. I think the most important topic we haven't dealt with is David and then the Psalms. Who wrote the Psalms? It's called the Psalm of David. In my dialect, the Bible, they actually ascribe it to David. The whole book is called the Book of David. Let's see if I can bring my Ghana Bible and see if that is how they call it. Where is it? Where is it? Psalm. Where is the Psalms? Lala. Jajelo. No, they call it songs. Lala. But Cynthia, I think in the tree they call it David something, right?
Yeah, they do the same thing. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, you have David as the name of the Psalms actually. So where did all this come from? Is it true that he wrote it? That's our to find today. So let's begin. Was David the author of the book of Psalms? The book of Chronicles somewhat credits David for organizing the music used in the temple worship. Chronicles does that. I'll get more into detail at the end of the class about Chronicles. But the tradition that David was an expert composer and musician also pervades the book of Psalms. So it's not only the book of Chronicles trying to make that claim or ascertain that. The book of Psalms, within the book of Psalms, you see that the idea that David may have been the composer pervades this book. What do we have in the book of Psalms? We have 150 songs and hymns, a collection of this from different periods in Israel's history. 150. Sometimes 151. We'll come to that. Nearly half of them, this 150 songs and psalms, nearly half of them, almost 73 psalms, contain the headings referring to David. So, yeah, it's almost more than half. 70, no, it's not. 73, 6, 140, yes, so almost. No. Has David in the title, in the heading, or referring to David. So, if people ascribe it to him, or the idea that he may have written it, maybe this sells it for people. But there are two major difficulties with connecting the Psalms to David. Number one, the headings that refer to David are not necessarily meant as claim of authorship. These headings in the Hebrew start with the preposition le David. Le David. So the preposition le that precedes David's name does not automatically mean that it was written by him, because that preposition can be understood in a wide variety of ways. Le David can mean to David, for David, by David, of David, belonging to David, pertaining to David, etc. So when it says le David, it does not mean automatically that David wrote it. Some people make those conclusions. But the headings may mean that the Psalms were dedicated to David or were part of a group of Psalms known as the David collection, or were written in the style of David. So some of them, when it says maybe David collection, it means that that psalm or that poem or that song should be performed with a harp. Doesn't mean that David wrote it. Sometimes in the ancient world, the kings will perform some of these things. So maybe the king performs it wearing a three-piece suit and a red bottom Versace shoes. So when we say Le David, it means that the person going to perform the song also has to dress like David dressed when he recited the poem, the song, or the hymn. Or maybe he wore shepherd clothes. So, yes, that is how it means the David collection. It does not mean that he wrote it. Not at all. Just by the le David, the preposition le, it does not mean that he wrote it. Number two reason why it is problematic to assign the Psalms to David is that the headings that we have of the Psalms were added long after the Psalms themselves were written. So the Psalms already exist, or the collections that became the Psalms already exists, and David is connected to it secondarily. It means that the connection of the Psalms with David is secondary. The hymns already existed, which I will show evidence of one, and David recites it. So the connection with David becomes secondary. And I mean, it reflects a common tendency in the Bible to associate originally anonymous writings with famous biblical characters. Just like the New Testament, you have names, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, being assigned to these texts that were written without names, without authors, or names of authors, just to give them some authority. So in that same case, many Psalms were attributed to David at a late date because of the tradition that he was the sweet psalmist of Israel. He was the sweet psalmist. He could play the harp. So all these songs are assigned to him. And we see this historically with the Septuagint. The Septuagint actually gives us an insight into this tradition. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, illustrates both these points that I've listed, number one and then number two. Why do I say that? The Septuagint associates 14 additional Psalms with David. So now the number goes from 73. If you add 14 to it, let me do the math. 87. So when we look at the Masoretic text, we have 73 as with Le David. But when you come to the Septuagint, we have 87. Because an additional 14 of these psalms are associated with David. And like I said, it's because the tendency to connect religious writings to known biblical figures grew over time. The Septuagint, the list of the book of Psalms ends with Psalms 151. So instead of the 150 Psalms in the Masoretic text, the Hebrew text, the Septuagint has 151 Psalms. And the interesting thing is the 151st Psalm, the last one, explicitly claims David wrote it. It actually talks about, it recaps the story about his early life and the triumph over Goliath. So we see how it is evolving. Are there 150 Psalms or are there 151? Most scholars, majority, if not all, hold to the 150 as in the Hebrew text, the Masoretic text. They don't consider the last one as part of the canon. Okay. Before we look into the Psalms from the Septuagint, are there any questions, contributions before we move on?
Brother Basil, yes. Can I ask you that? Is there a reason why there has been such, I mean, obviously away from the obvious, but I just want to get the psychology of why there's been such a push for the Psalms to be associated with David or to be given to David so bad that there's a real conscious push for that. And there has to be some serious benefit to do this. I mean, besides the fact that he's supposed to be a musician, but what is it that they're pushing this? What is the agenda? What is the main things that they want from pushing this?
I would answer that question at the end of the class. It's right there. Yes. It's not, the person not just interested in songs. No. There has to be a reason to push the narrative. Anybody can sing. But why is it important that David, dominates the Psalms? Yeah. We'll look at the political concern there. It's coming. Very good. Very good question. Okay, awesome. So when you read Psalm 71, I'm reading from the Septuagint, that is translated by Brenton. Anyone who wants the link, I can send you the link where I read the Septuagint from if I need to quote it. It says, so in the Masoretic text, it's not Psalm 71, it is Psalm 70. The numbers change as well, where some of the addresses are. So in the Masoretic text, it's Psalm 70. In the Septuagint, it is Psalm 71. By David, a psalm sung by the sons of Jenodab, and the first that were taken captive. O Lord, I have hoped in thee. Let me never be put to shame. Do you see an issue with this psalm? It says by David, a psalm sung by the sons of Jonadab, and the first that were taken captive.
Taken captive where, sir? Huh? Were you the first ones to go to Babylon?
Yeah.
Huh? David was over there writing it with you? We're going to see how that goes.
Okay. So even though it is a psalm of David, yes, Mr. Jason.
Could that be that they were captive by the heart of Yah?
If I'm supposed to interpret it from a religious perspective, agreeing that David wrote it, yes. That would be my way out. No, I'll bring, yes, it's all emotions and heart. No, but that is not the case here at all. Mr. Jason has been nice today.
When I read it, I don't see the same thing.
Right. I was saying the same thing, Mr. Jabet. Mine says, I seek refuge in you, O Lord. May I never be disappointed. It doesn't even have that sentence
No,
there.
this is from the Septuagint. That's why. This is LXX. It's a different this is what would have been like an earlier translation of the text. This is not the one we have today.
Correct. I'm quoting the Septuagint.
Okay, no, what I was saying is like when you see that here, it seems that the sons of Jonadab were singing that, right? But
the sons of Jonadab were singing.
It doesn't say that they are the one that wrote it, right?
No, the sons of Jonadab did not write it. They're singing.
Okay, they just sung it. Like for me, it's not clear. It seems that the sons of Jonadab sang the song the first time, but it ascribed to David. It's not clear actually. I don't understand what I read here.
Correct. So no, the sons of Jonadab are singing what David wrote.
Oh, okay.
Correct. And when you read the Psalms, it's talking about exile. Babylonian exile. So even though it is a Psalm of David, meaning that David wrote it as they were interpreted, it was written by someone else at the time of the exile. Because when you read, there's a context. The Babylonian exile happened way after David. So whatever Le David means, it did not signal Davidic authorship in every instance because it ascribes it to David. But David could not have written this during the Babylonian exile.
Rabbi, could it be like that the sons of Jonadab are perhaps from the claim to be from the house of David? And would a key also be to figure out what Jonadab means? I know Jonah means dove, but I don't understand the end there.
Correct. No, I haven't looked up the meaning of the name. But yeah, it could be. You could argue that maybe he's writing from the lineage of David, but to say Le David here means David wrote it, that cannot be accurate. So you can argue maybe Jonadab wrote it. Yeah. So what I'm showing is that because it says Le David doesn't mean that David wrote it. It doesn't necessarily mean that authorship can be ascribed to David. You come to Psalms 96, still the Septuagint. It's Psalms 95 in the Masoretic text. When the house was built after the captivity, a song of David. Now, this dates the psalm to the end of the exile, when the temple was built after the captivity. This is nearly 500 years after David. So a song of David doesn't mean that he wrote it. So now we have to reinterpret what that means. It's not authorship. Now we come to Psalm 137. The Masoretic text says something different. This is by the rivers of Babylon, our series, where we sat down, yea, we wept, we remembered Zion. The Septuagint says that it was written by Jeremiah. But it has Le David. Here it's translated for David. But those who say let David means that if David appears in the heading, it means that he wrote it, you would have difficulties. The Masoretic text actually removes this. It doesn't bring let David a Psalm of Jeremiah. It doesn't bring it at all. It just goes to by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. But the Septuagint, even though starts with le David, by David, for David, about David, whatever it means, it's Jeremiah who is said to have written it. So, le David, or David's name being in the heading, doesn't necessarily mean that we can claim authorship for him. We have 14 Psalms that has David's name in the heading. 14 Psalms containing headings referring to events in David's life. Yes, Mr. Mark, it's Jeremiah the prophet. Yes. Let's look at all 14 of them, and then I will point out some issues with them. Psalms 3, it says, a psalm of David when he fled from Absalom, his son. Psalm 7, a Shigayon. The reason why the Hebrew is left translated, untranslated, is because we don't know what it means. So a Shigayon of David, which he sang to Yah about the words of Cush, a Benjamite. We have Psalms 18 of the servant of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of David, who spoke to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh the words of this song on the day that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh saved him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Shaul. Psalms 30, a psalm, a song at the dedication of the temple of David. Psalms 34 of David when he disguised his sanity before Abimelech, whereupon he drove him out and he departed. Okay. Psalms 51, a psalm of David when Nathan, the prophet, came to him because he had had sexual relations with Bathsheba. Mr. David says, what temple dedication? Number 7, Psalms 52, a maskil of David. Maskil is a poem or a song of contemplation. We really don't know what it means, but that is what we think it means. So a maskil of David. When Doeg the Edomite came to Saul and said to him, David has come to the house of Abimelech. Okay. Psalms 54, a maskil of David. When the Ziphites came and said to Saul, is not David hiding with us? Psalms 56 of David, a maskil. When the Philistines seized him in Gath. Number 10, Psalms 57 of David, a miktam. We don't know what it is. When he fled from Saul in the cave. Psalms 54 of David, a miktam, when Saul had his house washed in order to kill him. Number 12, Psalm 60, a miktam of David to teach. When he fought with Aram Naharaim and with Aram Zobah, and Joab returned and smote 12,000 of Edom in the valley of Salt. Psalms 63, a psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. And then the last one, Psalms 142, a maskil of David when he was in the cave, a prayer. So these 14 Psalms, they contain headings referring to events in David's life. But these are not very useful for historical reconstruction. We cannot use them for historical reconstruction because they lack details, and then there are some issues with them. Let's start with Psalms 3. I won't do all of them. I'll just pick some to show you what I mean. Psalms 3 says that is a psalm of David when he fled from Absalom, his son. Well, I'm going to read the Psalms and tell me whether it makes sense. Psalms 3. A song of David when he fled from Absalom, his son. O Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, how many have my adversaries become? Great men rise up against me. Great men say concerning my soul, he has no salvation in God to eternity. But you, O Yahweh, are a shield about me, my glory, and he who raises up my head. With my voice I called to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and he answered me from his holy mount to eternity. I laid down and slept. I awoke, for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh will support me. I will not fear 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Yahweh, save me, my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheek. You have broken the teeth of the wicked. It is incumbent upon Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to save, and it is incumbent upon your people to bless you forever. I don't even know the question to ask.
This has nothing to do with Absalom, though. Like, completely nothing to do with him running from Absalom.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Unless someone sees it differently.
I
have
reading
a
the book
question.
together, but I can't do it. Who's the adversaries?
Plural,
Who
right?
rose up against him? Absalom?
The adversary
I'm trying. I'm trying.
not singular. Great man. I mean,
But
yes, go ahead, Mr. D.
yeah, but I know we're on subject, but this is interesting to me. Great men say concerning my soul, he has no salvation in God to eternity. What exactly is he talking about? Because that sounds like a New Testament saying. That's the part that's puzzling.
Correct. It's difficult answering your question because the psalm I don't think is related to the revolt at all. So, I mean, in the context of the revolt, I really can't say anything. I mean, it refers only generally to enemies without mentioning Absalom or any part of the revolt. It doesn't mention anything at all. You have struck all my enemies on the cheek. Absalom and your concubines, are they the enemies? I don't know. Verses 2. O Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, how many have my adversaries become? It's only Absalom.
Rabbi, I would like to. I'm trying to use my accountable talk stems, but I can't remember one right now. I would like to reply to what Mr. D said. I think another way that you could read he has no salvation in God to eternity is like saying there's no way in the world God will ever save him.
So who? Absalom or David here in verses 3? I'm trying to
Just
see.
so David is saying great men say concerning my soul. So David is saying people are saying about me. And so I'm saying another way to read that might be to say, ain't no way God gonna ever save David. You know what I'm saying? It ain't no way ever in life.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you take the revolt, if you take verses 1 from there, The psalm could make a lot of sense. But this is one makes it complicated, as in, like, what are you talking about?
Didn't Absalom have a supporting cast? Maybe those are his enemies. Like, didn't Absalom have people on his side as well? I'm trying here, man. Just work with me.
Yes, you wouldn't see them as your enemy. Your enemy will be Absalom. It would be the one in authority. So if Abner or one of the generals were supporting him, of course. But if Absalom comes with his own gang, it's actually him. He only fighting Absalom. He just has a force behind it. So
Rabbi, would it be wrong?
Okay.
Maybe you can make a good argument there. You could. Madame de Paula.
I was going to ask, would it be wrong to look at this in the sense of it being a prayer? And when I look at, that's the way I look at most of the Psalms, but not even considering whether it's David and Absalom, but when we pray against forces that come up against us, because I believe that there are forces spiritually that you can't see that are far greater than what we see physically. So this may be in reference to the forces that were enabling the adversarial forces that he felt were coming up against him. That's just the way I see it. I don't know.
Okay. Yes, I totally would agree with you. I'll remove verses 1 from there and just read it as you just suggested. So now I'm not looking to find, you see, because having read the book of Samuel, the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel, you know what happened. So you're looking to see, certain historical data from the prayer of the Psalms, but it is not there. No. So it gets a bit difficult. No. Okay. Look at Psalms 18. It says, of the servant of Yudhevave, of David, who spoke to Yudhevave the words of this song on the day that Yudhevave saved him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. Yeah. So when you come to the Psalm 18, it stays the same. For the conductor, La David, but this is the Masoretic text, so it's cleaning things up. So the Psalms 18 tells us that it was written when Yah had saved David from Saul, according to the heading, but it lacks any mention of Saul. You read it, you won't find it. We see a parallel of Psalms 18 in 2 Samuel 22. But this comes long after Saul's death in the narrative. So when you look at the narrative, the song comes long after Saul's death. So in context, it's a little problematic. It doesn't mention anything about Saul. And the parallel verse and the narrative verse comes way after Saul is dead. We'll look into details on this. I'll point certain things out why I think they put it in there. You come to Psalms 51. Is there a Psalm of David when Nathan the prophet came to him because he had had sexual relations with Bathsheba? So it assigns the occasion of David's repentance to the psalm after his adultery with Bathsheba. But again, read it. It does not name Bathsheba or the nature of the sin that the author, that is David, regrets. Doesn't mention it at all. But the heading says, well, this is the context. Okay. Now, some of these 14 doesn't match the information we know in the book of Samuel. Psalm 7 says, a shigayon of David, which he sang to Yah about the words of Cush, a Benjamite. Now, if you want, you can take the whole week to find out who this guy is. And there's no information about him anywhere else in the Bible. We don't know him. The text doesn't say anything about him. You cannot find him anywhere. But the psalm is about him. That is not too difficult for me. Yes, Mr. David, go ahead.
I'm sorry to cut you off or to jump in. Is that could Psalm 7 be referring to when he when dude was cursing him out? What tribe was that dude from? And then his response was, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like a bunch of people trying to kill me. How much more is this one guy cursing me out?" You forgot. I forgot the. You don't know the instance I'm talking about? Is that guy from Benjamin?
Correct.
So it could have been that, no? I mean, this would be a stretch still, but that's the only reference I could think of.
Yes. You could. Maybe you could argue it. I doubt. I doubt. But read the Psalms and see if it would apply to him. It did not. Remembering it in my head, maybe I may have overlooked it, but yes, maybe you have a point there. But I searched and I was not able to find Cush, the Benjamite. I don't know. But it may be him. Let's ascribe it to him so that David will look good. Let's do that. But that's not my concern at all. My concern is Psalm 34. Psalm 34 says that it was written when David feigned madness before Abimelech. Well, let's read it. Let's go to the narrative and read it. 1 Samuel 21. And the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you slew in the valley of Terebinth, behold, it is wrapped in a garment behind the ephod. If you wish to take that for yourself, take it, for there is none beside it here. And David said, there is none like it. Give it to me. And David arose and fled on that day from before Saul, and he came to Achish, the king of Gath. The psalm says it was Abimelech. The narrative says it's Achish. Verses 12. And the bondsmen of Achish said to him, is this not David, the king of the land? Was it not of this one that they would sing out with musical instruments, saying, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? And David took these words to heart, and became very much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. And he changed his speech before their eyes, and he feigned insanity before them. And he scribbled on the doors of the gate, and let his saliva run down upon his beard. And Achish said to his bondsmen, behold, you see a mad man who is mad. Why do you bring him to me? Was it Achish or was it Abimelech? Clearly it's Achish, but the psalm says it was Abimelech. Psalms 34. So it does not match the narrative that we have in the book of 1 Samuel. So, yeah.
Rabbi?
Psalm 30, unless somebody has a comment, Mr. Jason, go for it.
So David played like a sort of like a, like a retarded role, like crazy role, because he was afraid of the king. I thought he was like powerful and fearless and things of that nature.
Yes, he had to feign madness because Saul was chasing him. He had nowhere to go. He had to go to Gath. And they remember him for the one who killed Goliath. He was scared for his life, so he feigned madness so that people would not really consider him. Yep. That's David. Psalm 30 says, a psalm, a song at the dedication of the temple of David. David was dead about 13 years when the temple was dedicated. So it is unlikely that he wrote a song for that occasion. Or he wrote a song for that occasion. No.
Rabbi, it even seems like an afterthought in the note. It's like they're writing, this is a song at the dedication of the temple. Oh, yes, and it's of David.
Correct. If you read it that way, correct. Yeah. So, yes, you cannot argue that it's David. In Psalm 51, it says a psalm of David when Nathan the prophet came to him because he had had sexual relations with Bathsheba. When you read from 18, it assumes that the walls of Jerusalem had been destroyed and they are in need of rebuilding. So historically, we're looking at 586 BCE, that is almost 400 years after David lived in Jerusalem and had his affair with Bathsheba. There's a 400-year gap. But Psalm 51 says, with your will, verse 20, do good to Zion, build the walls of Jerusalem. In this Bathsheba encounter, when you read all the way down, he's speaking as if the walls of Jerusalem are down, and he's praying or he's yearning that they be rebuilt. So this is what we see in the book of Psalms, the 14 chapters that mention Le David, however you want to translate that, but they don't mean that he authored them. They couldn't mean that he authored them. And then when we come to the narrative portion, not the songs, the narrative portion of David's life, the book of Samuel, and then Kings, they make no mention of David writing the Psalms. No reference of David writing the Psalms. Even 2 Samuel 22, the one I said, talks about David, and in Psalms 18, where David sang what we know as Psalms 18. The text does not actually say that David composed the song himself. This is what the text says, 2 Samuel 22. And David spoke to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh the words of this song on the day that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. So is he writing it? No. The psalm exists and he is reciting the song. He is quoting or miming. He knows it and he's singing it. Someone has written it. David spoke to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh the words of this song. So when I come to Psalms 18 and I read, for the conductor of the servant of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Le David, I cannot say David wrote it. No. He's reciting it. So because it says of David or by David or Le David, doesn't mean that I conclude that he wrote. No, he did not write it. So if we go back to 2 Samuel, as far as the narrative is concerned, David may just as well have taken up a pre-existent song, in this case, a song of thanksgiving, one that he found that was appropriate to his situation, and then he recited it. I don't hold that view. My view is that a biblical author or a later hand inserted this psalm into the narrative of David's life. And I think it is the introduction of the song that gave this away. So let me state my position again. I don't think, or I don't hold to the position that it was a pre-existing song of thanksgiving. It was appropriate, so he used it. My view is that more likely a biblical author or a scribe inserted this psalm into the narrative of David's life. That's what I hold to.
Rabbi, verses like 18 through 21, they just like are kind of confusing. It's like it's saying like God doesn't want burnt offerings and things like that. God wants a contrite spirit, and then like in the last verse, it's saying, you know, then you will want bulls or something like that. Like, I don't know what's up with that.
Hey, I have got one better. CJ, check this out, right? It's saying that in the text that God wants a contrite spirit and things of that nature, right? But when Israel repented under King Josiah, the text says that God still killed them. So does he want a contrite spirit, people who are turning to repentance? And if you're going to be killed, what's the point of repenting anyway? Right? Kind of crazy.
Rabbi?
Mr. Vincent.
I thought that when David was speaking of the that he don't want the bulls and the sacrifices because that there was no sacrifice for what he did. I thought he was like making a reference like to that because there is no way. I thought that what he did, he deserved death. There wasn't no way to get out. Like if you stole from somebody, you can make that right in that sense.
Correct. So I think he makes that statement in the episode with Bathsheba. So with the sin of Bathsheba, he was saying that, you know, if Yah wanted burnt offerings, he would have given him. But he said he did not want it. He wanted a repentant and a contrite heart. So I know that statement's coming from, is it Psalms 51, I think? But if it mentions it here in Psalms 18, then it will be another context. So what we have seen, we can say they are anachronisms. They are anachronistic. But the presence of anachronisms in the Psalms, I think, is evidence enough, or very good evidence, that explodes the notion of Davidic authorship. References to things and events after David's death, which is of the temple, which was built by Solomon. You know, why make references to that? You know, the destruction of the Babylonians of the temple and the cities of Judah, there are references in the Psalms, in which that occurred in 586 BCE. Like I said, 400 years after David. And then the hopes of the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem and the city of Judah, all this points to a later date. So the Psalms that were written, or the Psalms that have this citations clearly shows us that they were written way after David. Way after David. And nowhere outside the book of Psalms does le signify authorship. Nowhere. So when it says le David, it doesn't mean that David wrote it. And the recognition that this is not any new news, the recognition that David did not write the Psalms emerged relatively early in biblical scholarship. It's been known that he did not write it. It's been very much widely known that he did not write it. But, again, with all of this evidence, we would wonder how it is that tradition came to claim that David was in fact the author of the Psalms, such that this is usually the first and sometimes the only thing that is known about him today. You mentioned David. What do you hear? Oh, the psalmist. The Psalms of David, chapters 23. Regardless of the evidence. So how did this begin? It began with a story of David playing the harp for Saul, which established David as a musician. But the narrative of David's life in the book of Samuel and Kings makes no mention of David writing the Psalms. Because the person sings or can play, Madam Alita last week said, we haven't heard him play. Anyone can take the harp and start, pulling the strings. But because the text says that he soothed Saul, he's the sweet psalmist of Israel. But the earliest records we have of his early life mention only this event where he played for Saul. And it doesn't mention anything about the Psalms. Now, in the book of Chronicles, which is dated about 400 BC, the Psalms do seem to appear in connection with David. Now we come into Madam Cynthia's question. The book of Chronicles, which suggests that David wrote it, when you look carefully, it doesn't explicitly say that. It doesn't say by name that David wrote it, but it brings it off, portrays it as such. What actually do we see in the book of Chronicles? This is what we read. 1 Chronicles 6. And these are the ones that David stationed to sing in the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh since the ark was deposited. And they were ministering before the tabernacle of the tent of meeting with song until Solomon built the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Jerusalem. Put that in your spirit. And then it lists the musicians or the Levites. It lists them all the way to verses 25. Now, let's go back here and read verses 16 and 17 again before I make the statement. And these are the ones that David stationed to sing in the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh since the ark was deposited. Where was the ark deposited? In Jerusalem. And they were ministering before the tabernacle of the tent of meeting with song until Solomon built the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Why is that important? David was, by all accounts, the one who initiated the formal worship of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Jerusalem. What were they worshiping in Jerusalem before this?
Wait, I'm sorry, Rabbi. Can you make that point again? I'm sorry.
I said David was the one who formally brought the worship of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to Jerusalem.
Nah, the point leading up to this, like right here. This and the stream before you put the David on there.
Yes. So here I was reading that these are the ones that David stationed to sing in the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh since the ark was deposited. And I was asking, where was the ark deposited? It was in Jerusalem. He brings the ark to Jerusalem. That was when Michal saw him dancing naked, and she did not agree with the move, pretty much. Bringing the ark to Jerusalem. So I'm saying that formally, because bringing the ark means that you bring in Yahweh worship, because the deity assigned to the ark is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So he brings, when he takes over Jerusalem, he formally initiates the worship of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Jerusalem. And I was asking, what were they worshiping in Jerusalem before this?
Before that was Jebusites, no?
Yes, they were worshiping the Jebusite
Salim
deity, Salim. And then the CG also adds the serpent, the bronze serpent. Why was it necessary to move the ark?
Because it's his place of power now. That's where he's setting up his city state.
Correct.
So it's important for him to move it to where his place of power is going to be.
Yes.
Is that a political move?
Political move. If your deity is in Jerusalem and he's asking you to all come under him,
that's a pretty smooth move.
Doesn't that also proves? I'm sorry. That also proves that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is with him. If anybody needed to know.
Yep.
This is why they. Oh, go ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
got another question real quick. Is that, okay, you said David took 30,000 people with him. Is that in case of uprising? Because, you know what I'm saying, it wasn't an easy transfer because you went to Shiloh.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, to steal the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh, because there was already priests in Shiloh. And then, but you had 30,000 people to do it. It wasn't an easy transfer. Hey man, just like a handshake and a briefcase. You know what I'm saying? It was like I'm coming with a troop of people. 30,000 people, a lot of people.
Yeah, it was a fight.
I never looked at it before. Yeah, it was gonna be a fight. Somebody said these Negroes stealing my ark. I mean, they stealing my. What's the word? Put it like this: is it, say for instance, you know how just like the Europeans did to the Africans. They would steal their deity. Whatever their deity was, whatever they believed had power, they would steal it and hold it captive. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like the same concept. If I believe that there's power in the Shiloh, in the Ark of the Covenant and everything, and it has the power, and then I go seize it and bring it to Jerusalem, then I just stole your power. I just stole your worship center. I just stole. It's a blackout. It's a blackout. It's a EMP, you know what I'm saying? I just blacked you out, you know what I'm saying? So you done. Your ghost is cooked.
That's why David didn't reign in the north, in the northern kingdom. You notice everything he did came back down to the southern kingdom part, like Jerusalem and the neighboring territories. And then the text is all centered around Jerusalem. and David's lineage as well too. So you can kind of see that the bending sort of the literature.
Correct. Yes. So
I get it now.
Yes, Madam Cynthia, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree with Jason. That makes a lot of sense. I did wonder why it was all, when I used to read the Bible, I used to think, why is it all centered around that area and the South? But I always thought, because, you know, you're made to feel the South are holy, so it was the right place to go. But then I have a question, Brother Basil. So if I understand that the moving the Ark of the Covenant was a political move, then if that's the case, so what's the story about Yah saying to him when that guy died, when he touched the Ark? Was that all made up? I don't understand.
No, the Ark it has this holy status.
Still, right? Yeah. So it has a holy status, but he moved it and he didn't use. Well, then that makes sense as to why he wasn't able to use the Levites, doesn't it?
Correct. Yes. So if you have embedded in your conscience that somebody touched the Ark and the person dropped dead, you will not bring troops to come and relocate the Ark, because when you touch it, you will fall dead too. So it could be a tool to defer people from an attempt to relocate it.
Right.
Yeah, Madam Cynthia, they would do that all the time. So like in other kingdoms, if you wanted something to be holy and for somebody not to come after you because you know you was gonna die, they would say like, hey, if you change this, then the deity is gonna bring calamity on you and things of that nature. Or they would they even have them in like the Moabite stories too, like where if you know if you do this, these things will happen as well. So it could be, not saying that it didn't happen, but it also can be a tactic to scare people in from changing it, which is why Deuteronomy tells us to not add any more to the text. It's a tactic used.
Yeah, there's I have to find the address. There was a dig, an archaeological dig. When they dug it, the inscription was that anybody who digs the grave and takes the implements in it, the person is going to rot to death. It was to scare them. But we dug it. And we took
Rabbi.
we took that and we're still alive. Go ahead, Madam Alita.
David needed to steal the ark. He had to go over there and and create that coup and take those 30,000 folk with him to go get it, because he needed a spiritual confirmation, a validation that he was chosen by Yahweh, that he was, and that he was the quote unquote spiritual, political, and the all things encompassed. So he had to go over there and get this and make him look official, because other than that, he was just a raggedy guy who killed a lot of people and killed his way to the top. This way he looked partially legit because he had the ark and he didn't die for moving it. Yeah,
correct.
I'm gonna throw in a little interjection. You know what I'm saying? I believe, I'm gonna go ahead and just go get crazy and get wild. This is what I'm gonna say. I believe that David killed Uzzah. You know what I'm saying? Because we could never prove David had killed all these other people in the text. Now we have David at the crime scene where Uzzah dies. So I'm gonna just say that out blankly, that Uzzah got killed by David. That's all I'm gonna say.
He killed everybody else. It's not a stretch.
Yeah, it's a possibility. That's I know it doesn't say that in the text. I know it says that he touched the ark and then died, but that also could have been the fear of I'm not saying that the ark is not holy, but the fear. But he may have killed him too. It's just the way they write in the story. Anything's possible. Now, you have shattered all my beliefs. So.
Rabbi.
Yes, awesome. Yes, go ahead, please.
See, I'm back with Madam Cynthia, because I thought the narrative was like, like after dude died, that it went with this one guy, and when David found out his whole household was getting blessed, and then David just just came and got it.
Correct. He said he came and got it.
Yeah, after the guy had died, he had it was a priest who had it.
Yes.
Because David acted like he was scared to take it after that incident, and then the priest guy had it, and it I have read it was like David had heard that the priest's house was getting blessed, and I went and got it. It wasn't like, I don't even think it mentioned 30,000. It was just like, well, his household was getting blessed, so now David wanted to bring it near him, basically. So is that made up? Is that an apologetic?
I mean, you can read when it comes to David, because of the propaganda, it gives us the permission to really question most things, and come up with our own theories. So yes, I think one can come to that conclusion. Yeah. So yes, notice that when he comes back to Jerusalem, he doesn't take away the serpent. They didn't believe that both of them could not coexist. Both of them could, and he did that. Mr. D, go and I continue.
The one who had the ark, I forgot his name, but it was interesting, if I'm remembering correctly, he wasn't even a Hebrew, but he became part because of the blessings and everything that came upon him, and he became a priest because.
Oh, you went up.
Oh, you didn't hear me? No, I forgot his name, but the one. I'm sorry, say it again.
No, we didn't hear the last part. You kind of cut up.
Oh, okay. The last part was he wasn't a Hebrew, but he became part of the Hebrew family because of the ark, because he was being blessed. And he also became a priest because he wasn't any of those things before the ark came.
Okay. Yes, I have to refresh my memory on that part of the text. But yes, I do remember it wasn't taken. No, it was a fight to actually relocate the ark. But he did that. He brought Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So that's why I say that David became a Hebrew or an Israelite by convenience. Now he has the ark. He still names his children Absalom. My God is Salim. Shlomo, names about with the Jebusite deity's name. So,
It's just like Constantine. He's just a Constantine.
I was just going to say that. I was just thinking it.
He was just a Constantine. He was just the original gangster Constantine. That's all he was. A proper gangster Constantine. That's what he. You know what? I can't believe. Oh my gosh. You know what? I'm so happy, Brother Basil, that you're red pilling all of us, man. Just red pill everybody. Red pill everybody. Just red pill them all, right? Because people want to stay in the matrix. Yeah, the religious matrix. You need to come out of there. Right? Yes, you may come out, and when you take the red pill, you come out. You may not be getting fed nicely. You may think, oh my gosh, I'm out like Neo. But listen, Neo is a different cat after that, guys. Remember that. Yeah? You can roll backwards and stop bullets and stuff. So let's not forget these things. right? But Brother Basil, I was gonna ask you. You know, Absalom, yeah? Is there like, because it just came to me about with Absalom? Absalom's mother was who again, Brother Basil?
Absalom's mom was what's her name? Ahinoam.
Is Ahinoam?
No, Abigail. Abigail.
Is that why he got the support he did? Yes, Asha. Is that the reason why he got the support he did to be king? Because of Jude? Is it the line because of the Judah link? Yes, Asha.
Yeah.
Yes, Asha.
No, wait a second. No, wait. This guy supported Absalom. Yes, Yes, it was Abigail. Somebody confirm. If not Abigail, then he was one of the women from Hebron. Can somebody confirm for me?
Okay.
Rabbi.
Yes.
It was Makkah. It was Makkah.
One of the women from Hebron, correct?
Yeah, it says was the third son of David, king of Israel, with Makkah, daughter of Talmud, king of Geshur. 2 Samuel 14:25.
Okay. Yes. So Absalom was with one of the women in Hebron, making his pedigree, because I know Abiathar supported him. The reason why Abiathar supports him was because of his bloodline, Absalom's bloodline, the Hebron link there. The first son.
Right, that makes sense.
Yes, the first son was the one who did the rape.
Yeah, and he died.
He was killed by Absalom.
Amnon.
Amnon was the first.
Who was Abner's mom?
That's a good question.
Saul's wife?
Stop. It's too much.
Yes. So Ahinoam was what's his name again? Abnan's mom, and he was the one that did the rape, according to the text. And then he was killed, which is very convenient because he would have been the heir to the throne, still keeping Saul's lineage. Amnon, correct. Still keeping Saul's lineage. So yeah, he has to get out. Abigail had a son as well. What was his name? Someone put it up.
Rabbi, so did that rape between Tamar and Amnon, it really happen, or he just needed a reason to kill him?
Yeah, I think he needed a reason to kill him, to get him off the stage.
Yeah, I'm going to lean on toward that too. I don't know if that story has any legitimacy. I just think that he needed to wipe dude out, and so he had to come up with a reason that made him look like, yeah, I killed him because of that, but no.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
You
that seems very strange. That seems very strange, and it seems like with the type of people they were, you know what I'm saying? Like, even if it did happen, you would probably cover it up. You know what I'm saying? So
true. It was very convenient.
Correct, because
for him to die.
A bona fide Shilonite Levite doesn't support Solomon as king. He supports his name, Absalom, I believe.
Rabbi, the name, so like the say Salam, the deity, right? Wasn't that in Jebusite territory also? And the Shlomo, you were saying that Shlomo's name is based on a Jebusite deity? Or what was the name of that deity?
Yeah, Salim, SLM.
Oh, still the same one.
Yes.
Now, what do we know about Salim again? I think we did cover this before. I think it's somewhere in my notes, probably.
Correct. He was one of the main deities of the Jebusites, even though they worshipped El Elyon as well.
Okay.
And Zedek, they worshipped Zedek as well. But Salim was the one of the main deities of the Jebusites. That's why he has children with Absalim. My father is Salim. And then he has Shlomo, which we say Shlomo now, but you see Salim, that's LM there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Correct.
Gotcha.
So Shlomo becomes king, and you have to explain how he becomes king. Does he really qualify to become king? Why does Abiathar not support Shlomo? Why does Abiathar support Absalom? Because you will notice that Absalom is born in Hebron. The text says that these were the children that David had in Hebron. Solomon is not born in Hebron. He's born in Jerusalem, on the other side. Yeah. So, Abiathar supports the one who was born in Hebron by
it was more
a Hebron woman. Because remember, the Calebites these were Hebrews, pretty much. They were part of the fold. Adonijah, yes. I am mixing the names. Please forgive me. I'm mixing up the names of David's children. Please forgive me. But the narrative, it's accurate there. See? So,
yeah, because I thought Absalom did that crazy stuff on top of the building.
Correct.
with the wives and stuff, and the first guy, the guy whose name you corrected, I thought he just went out there and got the sacrificing and had the people, and Nathan sent the old girl in there to like remind David of what you said, and then here he come 10 minutes later like, hey, you know what's going on out there? And
yes.
And that's what
you have to argue the legitimacy of Solomon on the throne, you know. So yeah, this is what we have. So David becomes an Israelite by convenience, and he introduces formally Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the worship of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, to Jerusalem, because they were not worshiping Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh at that time. So David worshipped both, and we can see him keeping the deity Salim in the names of his children. He calls Shlomo Salim, and then Nathan comes and called him Jedidiah. Now you have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He's never addressed as that. So that was like his throne name, kind of. You know.
Rabbi?
Madam Alitha.
Wasn't Solomon a pretty much a shoe-in in that David had slept with Nathan? Ooh. He was a shoe. Yikes! I mean, I'm just throwing the dirt in there because, of course, when the mama comes in, you know, remember what you told me, and then Nathan comes back in and seals the deal.
True.
Remember, you slept with me. Okay, now.
Yes. So again, like I argued, Nathan is also coming from the Jebusite side.
Exactly.
So you rally behind your king folk.
So Rabbi, do you think that does it say that they like utterly destroyed the Jebusites, like wiped them out? Because I could just see them all getting mixed in, like, you know, the ones who fight, and you know, we're gonna take them out, but the other ones would be like, oh no, we cool, we, you know what I'm saying, because them is people. So, you know,
So Jerusalem, it wasn't as big as we think it was, though. So him taking over, I mean, this guy's a military guy, you know. His first two places that he takes over was the original place that the king of Gath gave him, that territory, and then he took over Jerusalem. So if you are a Jebusite, you just rally behind him, because I mean the guy has the military force, so he doesn't have to take them out, you know. So they're all going to be grafted into the Israel movement, Judah. That's where Zadok comes in. That's when Nathan comes in.
so so is this like why we don't really hear nothing about Benjamin? You know what I'm saying? Even though they was all in their territory, like it was just Benjamin. They ain't even really matter no more. It was a mixture of, like, David already had outcasts and everything. He just brung a bouillabaisse of people to Jerusalem, and conveniently switched the religion, you know, so we could be under this one monarchy with this, you know, this one, you know, united everybody and became an Israelite for convenience, and it's just crazy. The Southern Kingdom is just crazy.
Correct, because the south belongs to Benjamin. His name, son of my right hand. The right hand was the south. It was Benjamin territory. But because David takes Jerusalem, because Judah now becomes part of it, now Judah dominates. But the territory actually belongs, the south is Benjamin.
Okay, I have a question about Jerusalem in general. I don't understand it. So here you have David, he established Jerusalem, then Solomon comes to establish Jerusalem. The Babylonians come, they destroy Jerusalem. Jerusalem is then again built. I'm just saying because, you know, everybody's saying Jerusalem's not that big. And then they go back and they build it. And then the Romans come, and it takes them days and months and whatever to destroy, to demolish Jerusalem. And then today, it's like Jerusalem is not on the map. I'm not understanding that. I mean, am I missing something here? But does Jerusalem actually exist, or it doesn't? Because I can't see how hard it is not to find if the Romans demolished it in 70 AD, have records of this site.
Correct. We cannot tell David's Jerusalem and Solomon's Jerusalem. We don't have pictures, we don't have archaeological drawings, we don't have anything. You know, so now the scholars argue, like, how big was this place? This temple, we know that it wasn't that big. We know that it wasn't that big at all. But the temple and then the details built there, you know, scholars want to find out, was it as big as it was said to have been? Probably not.
Because when you think of Jerusalem, you think of this grand city. It's just like, it's the wording. You know what I'm saying? You just think of this marvelous place. Like,
correct. Yeah. No. But yeah, so now we get into the historical data to see how Chronicles comes and it becomes a game changer. Nowhere in Chronicles, or in the book of Chronicles, in the Chronicles account, does it say that David actually wrote any of the songs. It doesn't say that. Rather, what we just read is his innovation to assign certain Levites and priests who ministered in the sanctuary to be in charge of singing. We saw that in 1 Chronicles 6, where it says, and these are the ones that David stationed to sing in the house of Yuderabe. That was his invention. to assign certain Levites and priests to minister in the sanctuary, where he brought before the ark in the tent. That was his invention. We see that in 1 Chronicles 15 as well. And David said to the leaders of the Levites to station their brethren, the singers, with musical instruments, psalteries and harps and cymbals, resounding to raise a voice in joy. 1 Chronicles 16. And he stationed before the ark of Yudhe some of the ministering Levites, and to make mention and to give thanks and to praise Yudhe, God of Israel. So this is his invention. He didn't write anything. He did not compose anything. He actually made the Levites sing what has already been composed, or perform what has already been written. So the premise of the book of Chronicles here, or the Chronicler, seems to be that these songs were already in existence, and David simply organized their formal recitation as part of the cultic ceremonies. He's not writing them. They're already there, and he is making, or he's set up a system where the Levites and the priests sing. But the chronicler, as we've seen, was particularly invested in the Jerusalem cult and argues for David's role in instituting virtually every part of this cult except the physical structure of the temple, which is credited to Solomon. So besides the temple, everything that you see in the Jerusalem temple is the hand of David. Pay very close attention to this because it's critical. It's the critical point here.
Rabbi, I have a quick question, if I might.
Please go ahead.
You said David brought the ark into Jerusalem.
Yes.
Jerusalem, part of Benjamin's territory. Before David brought the ark into Jerusalem, what were the Benjamites? Who was the Benjamites' deity? It was Yudhe, correct?
Yes, so the Benjamites would worship Yudhe, correct. They would rally behind the 11, and they would rally behind Yudhe, correct.
And the snake was also in Jerusalem?
Say it again, sorry?
And the snake, the brazen snake, was also in Jerusalem at the time?
Correct,
Is
yes.
that
what the Jebusites, because according to the book of Joshua, the Jebusites were still in the land. It was until David took over that he actually conquered the Jebusites, and the Jebusites became under them or subordinate to them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Got it.
You're welcome.
But Rabbi, why were the Jebusites worshiping the brazen snake that Moses supposedly made?
Correct. No, so they were worshiping it already. So they're not worshiping it because Moshe made it. No. The narrative of Moshe comes to explain why the Israelites were worshiping a snake.
Rabbi, stop.
So the worship of the snake doesn't, the Moshe narrative about the snake doesn't predate what the Jebusites were doing. No, the Jebusites were worshiping the snake already. But you have to explain why in the temple there was this snake there. So the book of Deuteronomy or the book of Kings tells us during Josiah's reform that he brought the snake that the snake of Moshe that the people have been worshiping, as if now is a bad thing. It wasn't. So you're giving me a reason why or how the snake came to be part of their ritual. No, the Jebusites were doing that way before the Moshe thing happened.
Wow.
Yes.
And so, do you tie in Moses' father-in-law, Jethro? So that's where I was going last week, right? Jethro, we want to believe that Moses was introduced to Yuhei through Jethro.
Yes.
But the first thing that Yuhei did with Moses at the burning bush was to turn his rod into a snake,
Serpent, correct.
a serpent. But that's so far away. So when I'm looking geography, like at the landscape, that's so far away from Jerusalem. And so I'm trying to figure out, maybe the logical thing to say is that more than one group of people at that period of time had a totem as a snake for their deity, as opposed to trying to just link everyone who had a totem as a deity to Yuhei.
Correct. So yes, I will link the snake to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. I would say the introduction of the snake. See, I'm looking at it not from Moshe's point of view. I'm looking at it from the author's point of view. What the redactors and the editors and the scribes are telling us. Because based on how Israel came into the land of Canaan, you cannot take the Moshe encounter at Sinai as everybody's experience. And where you see where I'm coming from.
I actually do.
Yes. So those who experienced that Exodus may have brought that tradition about Moshe at Sinai. Those who came, or the Hebrews that came out of the Canaanites, wouldn't have that tradition. So now you would take both traditions and then you merge them together for it to line up. But that would not be the tradition for the whole 12. So the snake, the introduction of the snake could be an etiology, however one pronounce that, to explain, where the snake comes into the picture. Because the snake is clearly in the temple in Jerusalem. And if we are monotheists, now we have to kind of start explaining some of these things. You don't if you're not monotheist. If you're henotheist, you don't have to explain anything. But with monotheism, with one deity and all that, now you really have to explain the snake. So I will think that is where you should look at it from, and then try to make sense out of that. But yeah, it could be a manifestation if maybe Moshe knew about the deity. It's and Madam Pamela, if I'm supposed to argue, maybe in the debate, arguing for this motion, I would say the author is showing how Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is giving Moshe dominion over the Jebusite deity.
Well, good for you, Rabbi. Because he certainly did utilize it to his benefit. Good for you.
It's like take the Jebusite deity by the tail and have dominion over it. That's why it's a silent. I can argue that. I think it would be a good argument.
Yeah, I can argue that too. I really wanted to try to tease it out and figure out why that snake, why Joshua got rid of that snake. But but when I look at it as a whole, your argument does, I can use that argument, or I can simply say that it wasn't, during that period of time, it wasn't just monotheism, right? There were Jebusites there who literally, their totem was the snake. And because during that period of time, one need not conquer the other, or one didn't have to take precedence over the other. Like we have today, you have to be, you have to be this, or you have to be that. They could live in harmony. It wasn't a, I don't want to say it wasn't a big deal, but it didn't manifest itself into a problem. They could coexist. And it wasn't until later that a problem existed. So good, but I do like your analogy.
I know scholars do that all the time. Yeah, we can do this. But yeah, it
And I
will.
think it's crazy. I think it's crazy how, like, Moses was able to. So he grounded up the golden calf, but he was cool with the bronze snake.
Or maybe not cool with it, but use it as a tool. And if you're using something as a tool, then you manifest power over that tool. You're wielding it to your benefit. I think that's the analogy the rabbi was pointing at. He used that snake to his benefit. He and Aaron both, right? And they did away with an enemy using that tool. So it benefited them, so they had power over it. So Yuhei showed up in that particular narrative as being supreme over that snake or that serpent.
At the same time, Sister Pamela, like, don't you think it's interesting though that in the people's mind though, wasn't that what they were trying to do with the golden calf? They were making an effort to do what they felt was an acceptable and okay thing to do because of whatever their needs were at that time. And at that point in time, there was no clear manifestation of the deity, I suppose. And so this was their way of being able to express that.
Oh, I'm not going to disagree with you at all. I just think that, again, when they brought forth that golden calf, Yuhei utilized Moses to destroy it. Moses was his tool, if you think of it that way. He destroyed the golden calf. He utilized the snake. The authors are brilliant. That's all I can say. They are absolutely brilliant, because anytime our deity came into contact with any other power or any other deity, we seem to make our deity come out on top. And I think that's supposed to happen when you become monotheistic.
Yeah, the golden calf thing is pretty interesting because if you notice, right after the golden calf incident, Moses get the Torah written again on the stone tablets, and those sets of commands he get is different than the ones in early in Exodus. They're very different. So the story of the golden calf is priestly because it deals with ritualistic rites, and you can see that with the commandments that were said written by Yah and given to Moses, and those commandments also include ritualistic stuff like the feast and things of that nature too.
What land would we say that we were in around that time in the wilderness, where they did, reckon or pay homage to a serpent totem or snake totem? I'm just wondering if it was nearby any Jebusites, why that might have arised or popped up?
No. So if you have to, what I'm doing is like how I think we should is I am standing. So for example, I'm standing the time of Solomon when these things have been written. So I'm standing the time where I have a reference to a snake in the temple. But I'm pushing monotheism. It means that I would have to explain some of these things that go against what I'm pushing. So how did the snake serpent get into Yah's temple? You need to give me an explanation. What is the explanation? It points to Moshe. Well, Moshe did not mean for us to worship the serpent. We came to worship it. So now you've given me an explanation or an excuse to how we perverted something that was not meant to be so. What Madam Pamela is doing is taking it backwards and say, well, I see another instance of a serpent. Back when Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh introduces himself to Moshe. So what is that serpent doing there? And I think the appropriate answer would be, if these people were not monotheists, then it means that they would know about this serpent deity in the wilderness. So it makes sense that the deities are not serpents before they started getting the storms. Then they need a storm deity. So I think that is how I will look at it. I won't look at it from Sinai coming to the temple. I will stand at the temple and then go backwards.
So,
Right.
Rabbi,
Can I ask a question about, when David supposedly had to choose a punishment for numbering Israel,
Yes.
and he chooses the plague. Like, so what is that really all about?
We can't jump there, no, Shuri.
Okay, fine. Let me know when you're discussing that one.
But Shuri just wants to hang David and say, okay, enough. We'll deal with that. Very good observation. Very good question. Extremely good question. So let me focus my point here. What I'm saying is critical to understand the question that Madam Cynthia was asking. The whole purpose of this, it just cannot be songs. It just cannot be because of hymns. There has to be a real reason behind why we've all come to believe that David wrote it. Mr. CJ, you're going to say something. Go ahead. I see a question mark before I move on.
Yes, Rabbi. Thank you so much. So I'm just trying to figure out, and you and Jason and some of the other classmates are pretty up on, the different 10 commandments and when they were given and how some words are left out of some of them. And it's not really 10 in some places, but
Correct.
The point is, I'm trying to, as a critical reader now, this is your fault. I'm trying to, what sense does it make for Moses to make a snake and tell the people to look up to after being given the 10 commandments? And one of them is don't have any graven images or something like that of things above or below or all of this kinds of situation. Do you understand what I'm saying? What is Moses thinking? You just the mount with God, and he has told you, do not make anything and look up to it for a resolution to anything. Just look to me. I don't know if the just look to me is in there, but it's the logical situation in my mind. But like, what is Moses thinking? And like, how does this make sense to the other people that are reading it? But then I suppose my answer is, I suppose the way it's made sense to me for the years it has made sense to me.
Correct.
But you know what I'm saying? But
did it. But now you're not reading it as such. You looking at it like, wait a minute,
like that doesn't make any sense to me.
Correct.
At all.
Yeah.
What's sitting on top of the ark?
I know.
What's sitting on top of the ark?
Man.
Yeah, you wouldn't, because Yah said it, so we just gloss over it. But now you're looking at it critically and seeing that, wait, if you make a bronze snake and they're supposed to look up to it, are you not introducing another deity? I mean, as human beings, if it worked the first time, I'll go back to it. Like Madam Thomas, a visual reminder. So it's like, okay, if I look up to this snake and I'm healed of snake bites, I sure can look at the snake again and maybe it would bring me riches. What if I bring food to the bronze snake? Maybe it will give me more favor. What have you just done? You've created an idol, which you're telling us not to worship idols. So yeah. If you're reading it critically, you ask these questions. But if not, you say, Yah said it. So if Yah said it, let's go for it. And then with the golden calf, like Mr. Jason said, you have 3 traditions of the 10 commandments. Or yes, the commandments. You have 3 traditions. And you want to introduce all the 3 traditions. You have to be able to introduce it smoothly. And that's where the priests come in. They are trying to make the thing fit. So they give the first tradition, and then something happens, and then they use that to give the second tradition, and then something happens, and there's a third tradition. So 3 traditions, bringing them together. The priestly hand tries to smoothen things up with narratives. And that's how it goes. But when we get to the golden calf, there are 2 instances of the golden calf. One in the wilderness, and then one by, what's the name of the guy? In the north.
Wasn't it the first king of the north?
The first king of the north. I forgot his name.
Jeroboam?
Yes.
Jeroboam.
My question.
Yeah, because that's what. Go ahead.
When you look at what Jeroboam said and what is recorded in Exodus, the golden calf, is word for word. These are your gods, O Israel. Correct? My question to you would be, which of the 2 traditions is first? We have a quote, word for word, in 2 different historical settings. One must have copied one. Which one is the original and which one is the copy?
The King's is original. The one in the wilderness is the copy.
You have to argue. I agree, but I want solid arguments. Not today, though. We can have a debate on that one. Those who think the Exodus one is original. So that is what, when we get there, we have to figure out which one predates what, so that we can find out what the author is trying to portray. Okay. Awesome. So, the Chronicler was invested in the Jerusalem cult and argues for David's role, not in building, because we know he didn't build, but everything else. Virtually every part of the temple is instituted by David. The only thing David doesn't do is build it. So the chronicler is arguing on behalf of David concerning this. Now, this is an innovation of the book of Chronicles because Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel doesn't mention it. It doesn't credit David for any of these musics or bringing Levites. No, it only credits him for bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. But the chronicler goes out of its way to associate everything else besides the building to David. Why is that? Why does the chronicler go to such lengths to link David with as much of the temple and cult in Jerusalem as possible? Madam Cynthia, your answer. In the 4th century BCE, when Chronicles was written, Israel had no longer a king. There was no king. I repeat that. Ah, boy. The recently rebuilt temple was the sole cultural and political center of the society. No king, but we have a temple. Does anybody know the king of Jerusalem after the temple was rebuilt?
Nah, all I know is Nehemiah and Ezra.
Okay. So?
Oh. Wow. So the temple pretty much, or the temple structure pretty much became the monarchy. Wow. Never mind. Keep going, bro. This is crazy.
The temple that Solomon built is destroyed. Okay, remove Solomon from there. Okay. We come back and then the temple is rebuilt, not by Solomon. By associating the temple with David, the beloved first king of the united Israel, Chronicles positions the temple as the functional continuation of the Davidic dynasty, even as the actual line of David has ceased to rule. In the absence of a king, the temple carries on the tradition of David. What was the tradition of David? The Levites he set in place, the songs, the hymns, everything. Everything is David. The setup is David. The worship is Davidic. They did not worship like that. They worshipped at shrines, but David changed the worship of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh when he centralized it to Jerusalem. He created the whole structure. The only thing he didn't do was the brick and mortar. Well, that has been destroyed. And then we've rebuilt it. But we didn't lose something. The traditions, the cultic practices. That is all Davidic. So in the absence of a king, the temple still carries on what David instituted, the traditions of David. So it is therefore easy to recognize the political utility, as I would call it, of the chroniclers, how the chronicler portrays David as instituting the cult and all its trappings, including the cultic music, which is the Psalms. This is what the chronicler is doing, because now there is no king sitting on the throne of David. As the text says, there will always be a king. There's no king here. No, there is a king. Where's the king? We still have his traditions.
Rabbi.
This is how the priest became the ruling class, correct? Yes, because there's no king, we have the priest. The priest are back of David. David is still alive, pretty much, if I can say that. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to ask. So this is how the priest came into power, and they used that David template to, because it was convenient. Would you say?
Yep.
To still political, and this is how they took over. So how long? Wow. So this is built going into the Maccabees and everything, with the priests being the ruling class, and so they really didn't care about the David as much as just using him like he used everybody else.
Correct. Yes, they were using. Well, yeah. You're arguing. I mean, you're writing. So you're arguing that was the case. You're arguing that there's no king, but we have the temple rebuilt. We didn't lose the tradition and customs. The tradition and custom says David. David invented it. So the chronicler is making a case.
Rabbi, I think we also see a parallel, like in modern times, if you want to call it modern times, with the Roman Catholic Church. It's like, even though Rome, so like Israel didn't have a monarch, Rome didn't have a king, but they still had their, priestly ways. So that's the situation that we kind of see playing out in the text also.
Correct. Yes. So the claim of Chronicles that David instituted the cultic music of the Psalms entered tradition and contributed to the link between the two. The traditions that he set in place. So after Chronicles, the songs of the cult, the Psalms, became David's songs, not by authorship, but by sponsorship. The songs that were sung in the temple, the psalms that were performed, the hymns, the poems, it was David who brought the system, institutionalized it. And since he institutionalized it, then he wrote it, or wrote them.
He basically like their founding father.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah. And then 2 to 3 centuries later, the Dead Sea Scrolls refer to the Psalms by David's name alone. So you see how the chronicler has really transformed something.
Rabbi?
This is Jason.
This is even, this makes Isaiah, this makes Ezekiel and all these prophetic books, it helps us understand them even more. So like in Ezekiel, in the last chapters of Ezekiel, scholars say that he didn't pin that. Like he just pinned, I think, like chapters 1 through 25 or something like that. But they were just saying, because of how the text is written, it's written like almost like the Chronicler. So like at the end, at this renewed time, you have David coming back. He's sitting on the throne. He's going to pass down lineage to his children and things of that nature. He's going to restore temple sacrifice and all of that. So it's just crazy to see how this is like all playing out.
Correct. Yes, we'll look at Isaiah very soon. I'm about closing, so yeah, I think I put him in my closing remarks. Okay. So David is not necessarily the author of the Psalms, but his name is synonymous with them. The step from there, when your name is synonymous to something, the step from there to authorship is very small. Yeah. So we call it the Psalms of David. The Psalms of David. And it's not like Mr. Jason was saying. David became viewed as the author of the Psalms, just as Moshe became viewed as the author of the Torah. Though in neither case does the text actually make these claims. So it's not David alone. Even Moshe, he becomes the author of the text. And we know clearly he did not author majority of it. And this is a consistent and, should I say, quite ancient trend toward associating anonymous text with famous figures from the past. If one wanted to lend authority to a work, for instance, it was typically to do so by putting it in the words of a founding figure, like Moses. The book of Jubilees is credited to Moshe. No, we are doubting he wrote the Torah. And now you're telling me he wrote Jubilees? And this is a text from the 2nd century BCE. And it introduces itself as having been dictated to Moshe on Mount Sinai. We have Ezra as well, who was a founding figure. And the book of 4th Ezra is said to have been written by him. And in that book, he's speaking in the first person. That's crazy. And these are books outside of the Bible. They're not canonical books. But then you come into the Bible, and the process can be witnessed. Very famously, we have an anonymous prophet of the 6th century BCE who gave eloquent voice to the hopes of the exiles in the Judean community. This beautiful writing attached his work to, and because he attached his work to, he borrowed the authority of the famous 8th century BCE prophet Isaiah. You should know, if you don't already know, that the book of Isaiah was not entirely written by the prophet Isaiah. No, there are 3 Isaiahs. Isaiah chapter 1 to 39 was written by the historical Isaiah. Isaiah chapters 40 to 55 was written by a student of Isaiah, and then Isaiah chapter 56 to 66 was written by a different student of Isaiah. So when Cyrus is mentioned by name and it's to the point, is detailed, please, he's writing after the fact. That is why I was telling Madam Reader, when I say close the book, when it comes to the prophecies, this is why. It wasn't written for our day. The person writing it is writing it after the fact. He's going to get it correct. Isaiah is dead and gone. The historical Isaiah, he's dead and gone by this time. And we can see from the vocabulary, we can see from the language, words used changes from chapters 1 to 39. From 40 to 66, different. Just as a teacher can tell that this is my essay and this is Madam Sonia's essay because our writing style is different, you can tell in the book of Isaiah that the writing style changes. And then the context puts the writer at the time when Isaiah is dead, long ago. So it is, with these examples, it is likely then that as the association of David with the cultic poetry increased over time, more and more such poetic materials was attributed to him. And as we have seen, there's even evidence that this was the case. We see it in the Septuagint, where instead of 73 chapters that starts with David, by David or for David, the Septuagint adds 14 more. And then the Septuagint also has Psalm 151, but it's longer than the one we see. Sorry, the Dead Sea Scroll also has Psalms 151, but it's longer than what we have in the Septuagint. So what we see then that in closing, a shift from the Psalms having been authorized by David to the Psalms having the authority of David, from text perceived as associated with David to text perceived as authored by David. These are the transitions. He authorized it to be sang. Now it has his authority. It became associated with him after that. Now he wrote it. The view of David's authorship of the Psalms developed gradually over time, from the simple playing of the lyre for Saul to the full-blown composition of the entire Psalter. The notion of Davidic authority or authorship of the Psalms is not rooted in any historical fact. It belongs to the growth of tradition about the Psalms and about the figure of David. The chronicler had to make a connection, had to make a case. The temple is no longer standing. The king no longer a king. David will rule forever. There will not be vacancy on his throne, but there is no king. Oh, the institution is still there. So the chronicler makes that connection. And with that connection, now something that he authorized came to have his authority, came to be associated with him. Now, it transitioned to say he was the author. Did he really write it? I hope you have your answer. Now,